Hello, I'm Matthew Jarron, Museum Curator at the University of Dundee and Coordinator of the Public Art Dundee project, and welcome to the latest in my series of virtual public art walks. And this is going to be the first of two films that we're going to do exploring the Hilltown. And so we're starting at the bottom here at Victoria Road, just outside the back entrance to Dundee Central Library. And there are various pieces just outside the library here, two of which I think we can actually see in this image, but the others are unfortunately rather hidden. So the first to point out, which we can see both here, running down the wall, and also, you can't really make it out, but the railings along the wall there. And I'll cut some photos so you can see it better. This is a piece called Film Projection, and this was created by David Franklin, who was one of the graduates of the first year of the pioneering Public Art and Design MA course at Duncan of Jordanson. And this was done in 1991, marking the fact that this was also the entrance, of course, to the Steps Theatre, which for many years was the main art house cinema in Dundee before the DCA opened. And for a long time that was the only artwork that existed here, and then a major redevelopment of the library took place between 1996 and 97, which among other things involved creating this whole new entrance with the glass roof here, and one of the major installations there were these very splendid gates that you can see here that were designed by P. Johnson and Company at Rathbuyers Forge. And the idea is that it relates to writing and information capture through the ages, from ancient hieroglyphics up to modern computer language. Tying into that is a piece that's sort of rather hidden in the garden here, which is called Stone Pages by the artist Mary Bourne, again done at the same time, 96 to 7. And it's a series of stone slabs, so kind of referring to sort of the earliest form of writing on stone, but they're also like pages, with inscriptions on them, and there's also carving along the side of the sort of embankment here, and also around the gate there's the text leaf on leaf that was also part of that installation. Where the little bicycle racks are, P. Johnson and Company also made those, and they have these rather lovely little feet on them, which is a really nice little detail that you don't often notice. There are many more pieces inside the library, but I think we'd have to do a whole separate tour to cover those. So we'll move on from there. Okay, so here we are at the bottom of the Hilltown. And first thing to point out, this whole area was quite significantly re-landscaped by Dundee District Council around about 1986, and they created a whole amazing new area, having demolished lots of old tenement buildings, to create this whole open space with these different kind of levels and the nice wall designs and so on. And they also laid out Wellgate Park at that time as well. And there's a nice little painted sign at the entrance to the park here. And that was a later addition done by David Houdini as one of a series of little signs he did to parks in the area between 2006 and 2007, and we'll come on to see some of the other ones later on. I think this is the largest one. Now we can't see it very clearly here, but just on the side of the little theatre, let's see if we can see it better from further back. Okay, you can see it a bit better there. So this piece here is one of several that were created by the artist Peter Nigel Mansfield as part of a site-specific public art exhibition called We Reign Invisible in 2011, which is part of a project called Documenting Hilltown. So this was at the time when the big Alexander Street multis were being demolished, and indeed many of the other smaller houses in Hilltown were also getting demolished. And so this big community project really to try and capture that and in a way sort of process and deal with that change through public art. And so what Mansfield did was that he actually used various pieces of debris from the demolished multis to create artworks. And so this piece is called Wendy's Last Story. And Wendy was the last resident to leave Wellington Tower before it was demolished. And it's actually made from stair panels that were rescued from the debris of the demolished tower. And there are two other pieces by Mansfield that you can also still see. You can just see the sort of shape of it here. This is a piece called Little Boy in a Big Armchair. And there's also a smaller piece down here called The Cat's Claw. And they were both made from Perspex window boards from from the ruins of the Alexander Street multis, and they feature images of local children. Now, what we would normally do on my walking tour is we'd actually head up the stairs there around to the back of the little theatre, which I obviously can't do on Google Streetview, so I'll just cut to show you these lovely little mask mosaics. And they were created as a community art project facilitated by the artists Teresa Lynn and Pammy Bennett in 2010 as part of the City Council's Environmental Arts programme. Now we can wend our way through the lovely Wellgate Park here to our next piece, which is just hiding behind these trees in here. So this is a wonderful brick mural that was created by John Gray in 1986. Gray, of course, is now the City Council Public Art Officer, but at that time was working for the engineering department in Dundee District Council, and they were responsible for the dramatic re-landscaping of this area to create this beautiful park. The whole thing is really wonderfully designed, and this is one of a number of brick murals that Gray designed in various landscaped parts of the city, and we've seen other examples on other tours, including the Stobswell tour and the Lochee tour. And the reason this came about was that much of this work was being funded through the Manpower Services Commission, and they had specific funding to help train bricklayers. And so doing complex brick designs like this was a really good way of testing out the skills of the bricklayers. Now, what we would do now is we'll head out the sort of back entrance of the park, just up these steps that you can see here, and we'll come out on William Barclay Square. Right, so here we are at the far end of the park, and again just actually want to notice these lovely little metal designs on these posts here. Again, I suspect this may well be one of John's designs, but it's just that all that kind of really quality of detail that made these redevelopments so extraordinary at the time. So this is William Barclay Square, and if we just head down here, just on the wall here, there's a little plaque honouring William Barclay. So Barclay was a long-standing secretary of Dundee Trades Council and was also very actively involved with Dundee College. And so this plaque was jointly commissioned by Dundee College and the Trades Council. Don't unfortunately know who did the actual artwork on it, unfortunately. Think sometime in the 1990s, but don't actually have a specific date for that. Now, just briefly going to head a little bit downhill, just so we can see these nice sculptures here. So this is Sails by Kevin Blackwell, which originally dates to 1999, but this is only part of a much larger installation that was originally not on this site, but further up the Hilltown in the Maxwell Town area along Alexander Street. And as part of a larger regeneration scheme for that area, the artist Kevin Blackwell was commissioned to work with local people to do something to regenerate this area. And he worked mainly with kids at the local Saturday clubs, got them to research for themselves the history of the area, and try and involve their parents as well, because it was much harder to get adults involved than it was to get kids interested. And one of the results of this was that they discovered an old linen works that had existed nearby that had made sails for ships, and so that then became the main theme for the artistic part of the project. And so, as well as these sails on poles that were originally in this little square, there were also new railings, there were various brick infills on the walls and on the pavement, and also further sail motifs in windows as well. Unfortunately, the rest of that all had to go when those buildings were demolished, but obviously the ones on the poles thankfully were rescued and were resited here further down, where they have this splendid vista looking down into the centre of town. Okay, let's start heading upwards. But in fact, we're not going to head upwards very long, because we're actually going to turn off and head along Hilton Terrace. Past the Maltese. Now, this was just a blank wall when Google Streetview captured it in 2014. But in 2016, it was transformed with a wonderful mural, View from the Hill, which was an Our Community Space project run by the artist Pammy Bennett with the graffiti artist Adam Milroy. And it was actually then subsequently repainted in 2019. Again, Pammy Bennett working with local school children. Right, Google Street View is not going to want to let me head up this path here. So let's just cut and see what we can do. Okay, so we follow that path up beside the park here, and we come on to Rosebank Street, and we can just head down here back onto Hilltown itself, and we'll just carry on upwards. Now, just along this strip here, we have some very interesting little circular things that you can see here. And these were all shop signs that were created in 2010, designed by the artist David F. Wilson. Wilson had also designed all of the street furniture in the city centre and various lamp brackets and flower baskets and so on that you see all over the place. So he was kind of ideally placed to design these bespoke shop signs. And this is part of a general facade enhancement scheme to try to improve the look of a lot of the businesses in the Hilltown. And so each shop was basically given its own bespoke sign with kind of symbolic elements that represented whatever the business happened to be at the time. Now, of course, over the years since then, almost all of these shops have changed hands, and so they no longer actually necessarily relate to the original business. And of course, the actual signs themselves have long been removed and are just sitting blank, unfortunately. Okay, here we are at St Salvator's Church. Extraordinary building, fairly unassuming outside, but absolutely extraordinarily rich decoration inside. If you've never been, I urge you to go. It's normally open on Doors Open Day. And a couple of things to notice here. First of all, this rather splendid golden figure of Christ on the wall here, which looks like it's probably been here for ages, but actually it was only installed about 1997. I don't know who the sculptor was, unfortunately. And then the other piece, which I'm not actually going to be able to go over there to show you, but just in the doorway here, there's a little mural which was created in 2018 to mark the fact that this building that's now the Maxwell Centre, which is the church hall, was actually originally a school. And unfortunately, although this is a relatively recent piece, I don't actually know the artist who did this, so if anybody knows, do please let me know, it would be really helpful. Okay, we're going to head down this way. Now, gosh, the houses have completely disappeared there. Here they are again. Now, these houses were just being built at this point in 2018. They've now been completed, and just in this spot here, there's a new sculpture that has appeared just the end of 2019, which is a Percent for Art piece paid for by Hillcrest Housing as part of this housing development, created by the artist David F. Wilson. It's called Woven Connections, and it looks at the history of the weaving industry and of the area, and it's one of a number of pieces that Hillcrest have commissioned David to do over the years. Now, this tenement block here is one of the most extraordinary things in the whole of Dundee. This is the block known as Faces Land, and the reason for that, as you'll see if I zoom in, is that it's absolutely covered in these extraordinary faces. Every single window has got them, both kind of human and animal, and ones where you're not entirely sure one way or the other. And so look at them all, absolutely amazing. And we've no idea why. So the block was built in 1871, architect John Bruce, and it was commissioned by a guy called William Webster, who also commissioned another block on Ann Street, which has now been demolished, which was also covered in these faces. So he obviously had a penchant for bizarre faces. Goodness knows why. I should say, although that building was demolished on Ann Street, one of the faces was kept and has been added on the main entrance to the new block that has been built there. So you can still see one of the original Ann Street faces, but nowhere near as many as are on this absolutely wonderful building. It's just extraordinary. Now, just a brief diversion just to show you this wall here. So you can barely make this out, but there's just little traces here of what was left of a huge mural that was considerably longer than the wall here, because half of it was demolished to make way for these houses. This is what's known as Walker's Mill, because it's on the site of an old mill. So there was a huge, great long mural painted here by the artist Vince Rattray, I think sometime mid-1990s. It was definitely there by 96, maybe a few years earlier. Unfortunately, it didn't survive very long. I'll show you some photos of it here. The paint started flaking off fairly soon, and in fact, as you can see here, whole chunks of it ended up coming off, and so eventually they just painted over the whole lot, and then, as I say, half the wall got demolished anyway. Really nice little designs on the gates there, I've noticed. Now, here we are at the entrance, one of the entrances to Hilltown Park, and you'll see these wonderful big sort of gateway squares here, and there are more of them at the other side as well. These were created as part of a redevelopment of the park that took place around about 2006 to 7, and I think designed by Nigel McDowell, not 100% sure about that. And there's also another of David Houdini's wee signs on the red one here. There are various different things inside the park, and I'll just have to cut to photos of them because I'm not going to be able to actually obviously go through that on Google Streetview. So the first thing to note, which you actually can see here, are these plinths here that have got little ceramic tiles on them. And that was, again, a community art project with Pammy Bennett working with a local writing group called Changing Horizons, run by Blair Denwet. That was a project done 2007 to 8. If we then head further into the park, there's a similar project that was done a couple of years before that, where again ceramic tiles were painted by local school children and placed on these benches here. This was the artist David Houdini working with children from Dens Road Primary School. Further over we have the rather splendid Hilltown Park Mosaic. This again was David Houdini working with local volunteers. That was 2005. There's a kind of interesting mural mosaic combo from 2007, which was Pammy Bennett, Catherine Holtett and Annie Whitehead working with local members of the community. These copper panels created about the same time, 2007, Annie Whitehead, again a local community project. This Love Heart mosaic, again the same time, Pammy and Annie involved in that project. Right, here we are out on the other side of the park, back on Hilltown, and you'll see a whole succession of these squares again. I should say that the squares were originally covered in beautiful, well, they still are covered in beautiful little tiles that have all sorts of very subtle colours and shades to them, but unfortunately inevitably some of the tiles ended up coming off, and rather than replacing the tiles it was cheaper just to repaint, just to paint over them, and so they now have rather basic colours, but every so often you can see bits where the original tiles are still showing and you can see how much more subtle the colours were. A couple of other things to point out just on this entrance. So first of all, there's another of David's nice little paintings here. And on this side there's a little plaque marking the site of Bonnet Hill Church, and that was by Roddy Matheson and his Mobile Foundry in 2011. Now, right across the road here we have the Hilltown branch of the Dundee Savings Bank, which has some lovely carving on the outside of it. And I'll cut to some photos so you can see this better. And there's more around the other side on Stirling Street as well. This is from 1904, the architect David W. Baxter, but I don't know who did the carving, unfortunately. Just want to point out this kind of comedy mural here, which Paco Graf created for the Chinatown takeaway. I don't know the exact date of that. Okay, here we are at one of the great landmarks of the Hilltown Clock, or originally known as Barry's Clock. And this was a gift to the people of Dundee, and obviously specifically this area, by local councillor Charles Barry, who just happened to get elected provost not long after. I'm sure that we're not in any way connected. It was designed by the borough engineer William Mackesson and made by local clockmaker G.D. Rattray. Rattray had actually originally put kind of ornamental lamp brackets on the side of the pillar, but they were later removed. And then just next to it we can see this really nice piece called the Memory Railing, which, again, I'll cut to some photos, is covered in little quotations, little stories, sayings, catchphrases and so on from the local area. And this was created by Alan Wilson in 2017, and he worked with members of the Grey Lodge settlement to gather the various pieces of text. And let's just turn round while we're here, and oh, actually we need to go further up the road a bit. Just want to point out this kind of giant comedy cow on the side of York Butchers here. I don't know who did it or when, but it always amuses me. Now, there's lots more to see, but I think we will pause at this point and we'll do the rest in part 2. So I hope you found that interesting. Join me soon for the second part. Bye for now.